Hi, I'm Cathy Rudd. Okay, so today we made the pretzels that are dipped in the white bark chocolate, and then we sprinkled them with a little bit of green sprinkles for Christmas. And then next we did the peanut clusters, where you're taking Spanish peanuts, and after you have mixed together chocolate chips and chocolate bark, then you and a little bit of Crisco to make them have a little sheen on them. Then you add the peanuts to them, and then you simply just spoon them out onto a piece of wax paper and let them set up. And once they're done setting up, then they're ready to eat, and they are heaven on earth. So I hope you'll look up those two YouTube videos, and you can see how to prepare these two recipes. Okay, so now we're all on to almond roca. So almond roca is something I only make at Christmas time. I don't make it during the year. And ideally when you're making candy, you want the weather to be dry and cold. So needless to say, the last couple of weeks I've been doing a lot of candy because there hasn't been any precipitation, which means moisture in the air. And the candy just turns out a lot better when you're not dealing with the elements of weather. So first of all, what I'm going to do, hopefully you have a cookie sheet in your house. And what I'm doing is I'm taking just about an inch worth of butter, and I'm going to put the butter onto the pan, because the pan needs to be coated before the candy goes on here, because we don't want it sticking. We want the candy to come right up once it's cooled. So I'll just lightly apply this to my cookie sheet. Plus it gives it a nice, yummy, rich texture and flavor at the same time. Who doesn't like butter? So I've got this just about done. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer it over here onto my counter, because when we get done making the candy, I'm going to have to quickly pour the almond roca onto this cookie sheet because it will set up very quickly. So let's get that ready. Here, I'll put this down for a second. And I like to have this little washcloth underneath it because it helps it stick to the counter so it's not sliding all over as I'm trying to put the boiling hot candy onto it. Okay, so now I'm going to take 2 cups of sugar, and I'm going to take, let's see, 1 1/2 cups of coarsely cut up walnuts. And if you don't have a little Cuisinart to make your little walnuts small and into little pieces, you can put them in a big baggie and take a rolling pin and just roll over them until you get the consistency that you want. Then I'm going to add 2 sticks of butter, real butter, and a 1/2 cup of water, and a 1/2 cup of the carob syrup. And again, you can get all of this in your grocery store, wherever you are. So we're going to put that in there, and then we're going to put this on the stove. And for this, I'm going to use a wooden spoon. It just seems a little bit easier. So we'll turn on the stove. And what I want to do is I want to heat this to boiling. And once we come to a boil, then I'm going to stir it and watch it all dissolve, and then I'm going to cover it and turn it down a little bit. We don't want it to have a vigorous boil, but we still want a light boil while this is all coming together. And we'll put a lid on it. I might have already said that. We'll boil it for 5 minutes. And then once we take it off the heat, we'll uncover it. And then I'm going to use my candy thermometer. And the candy thermometer, we will want the temperature to rise between 300 and 325 degrees.
So you were talking about candy thermometers earlier, and you had mentioned that you buy a new one every year. Why is that?
You know, I want it to be as consistent as possible, and the candy thermometer that I have, I always hand wash, but for some reason the numbers start to rub off and fade off, which could be a problem because, like I said just a moment ago, you want to heat it between 300 and 325 degrees. So you need to be able to read that on your candy thermometer. And you can buy a candy thermometer now in most stores. You can buy them in grocery stores. You can buy them at Sur La Table. You can buy them at Williams-Sonoma. I'm sure you can buy them online. And they're just really handy to have in your kitchen. You want to be as accurate as possible.
And a lot of people are intimidated by the thought of using a candy thermometer, but it's not difficult. It just is.
It's not difficult at all. This is what it looks like. Large numbers so you can read them unless they faded off. And then it has a little holder on the back, so what you do is you just pop that onto your saucepan and voila.
Yeah, and I think people they're just intimidated by the thought of using a candy thermometer, that you're just using it basically like any and waiting until your ingredients reach a certain temperature.
Right. And that the 300 to 325 is going to be just right above the hard crack candy stage.
Huh.
And that's ideal for candy making. Whoops. So you want it to set up because it's going to be a brittle. It's going to be hard. And that's what you want. You like to bite into that caramel flavor with the walnuts that you've added. And you've got a rich, buttery taste going on. And of course it's sweet because you've added the sugar. And so it's just a really nice little dessert to have, or a little snack, depending on what time of the day you're eating it.
And how long does it usually take for you to make this recipe? Because people are also intimidated about making candy because they think it's such a long process, and the purpose of your 3 videos today are to show how fast how quickly it takes to make candy.
Right. So what I like to do before I do any cooking whatsoever, I have every single thing measured out. And as you saw before I put this on the burner, I had already buttered the pan, the cookie sheet that this candy is going to be going on to. And so I like to have everything completely ready so that when my candy is starting to boil or going up to the hard crack stage, I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, I left something out, I've got to run over and get that out of the pantry, because that's when things usually go wrong. They either boil over or they burn, and you just don't want that. You have to end up throwing everything out. And so I would say time-wise, this is probably about a 15 to 20 minute procedure, and don't quote me on that, but that's about as long as it takes. We're waiting for this to come to a boil, and again, we don't want it totally on high, but I've got it about 3/4 of the way on my gas burner. And so once this comes to a boil, then let me flip this over really quickly. Once it comes to a boil, which it's starting to do, I'm going to stir until everything's dissolved, which it is. Then I'm going to cover it. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn it down, because when you cover it, that keeps the heat in. And you don't want it to be a vigorous boil. You want it to boil, but not so that it's boiling right out of the pan. So now we're going to put the top on, and we're going to set the timer for 5 minutes. I'm just going to sit back and wait for it to do its trick.